Well, today I'm back where I started this series of videos 7 weeks ago. I'm right beside the River Tay, just downstream of Dunkeld and Burnham, which is where I live. We're almost in May, the trees are starting to green up nicely, but the cold weather has come back with a vengeance, and in fact there's an enormous black cloud heading my way, so I may be about to get hailed on. This time next week the die will be cast. Will we have voted for the freedom to choose the future that we want for Scotland, or will we have chosen to have that future denied to us for many years to come? I've made no bones about the fact that I believe passionately in Scotland's potential as an independent country. But that doesn't mean that I don't have some sympathy for people who feel nervous about it, who feel that right now it may be a step too far. I would just say that remember, this election next week is not a vote for independence per se, but merely a vote for the right to make that choice when the time comes, and then to accept or reject it. When the time comes and we vote for independence, as I believe we will, it will be a big step, there's no doubt about it. For some people it will mean complicated feelings of loss and separation, alongside anxiety about the uncertainties of the practicalities like what currency we'll use, what kind of border there might be, will we be able to rejoin the European Union, and so on. But these are only practicalities, as I've said before, and they have never in the past prevented a country becoming independent, so they will be sorted out. But I emphatically reject the view that independence for Scotland will become some kind of disaster, which is what some people would have you believe. Quite the contrary, I think. We have everything we need to make a huge success of it. We have the mature economy, the long-established institutions, the well-established businesses and business sectors, a culture that's admired around the world, spectacular landscape and extraordinary natural resources, alongside the energy, drive, creativity, ingenuity that have won Scots' admiration and respect around the world for centuries. This is the light that we need to shine into those dark places where that bad old story that Scotland is a country that can't make it on its own still lingers on. And on that, I would say that when you come across stories like that, when you hear them on the television or you read them in the papers, if you possibly can, find out where they originate and who is behind them, who has an interest in pushing them. Because today, I'm afraid we live with a BBC that has, to all intents and purposes, become an organ of the state, and we live with a newspaper sector, 95% of all titles currently owned by about half a dozen very rich old men whose main interest in maintaining the status quo so that they can get even richer. We could become one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Not my words, but the words of Nicola Sturgeon just this week on Channel 4. And she's not a woman given to making claims that she can't back up. Nicola Sturgeon, who was widely admired and respected as a leader around the world before the pandemic arrived, and whose standing has only increased over the last year for the empathy and the honesty and the compassion with which she's led Scotland through the crisis. Nicola Sturgeon, who is one of a small group of remarkable women leaders, whose day as the future shapers of the world has surely dawned, and not a moment too soon. If you want to highlight the difference between Holyrood and Westminster, you need look no further than the difference between the characters of Nicola Sturgeon and her English counterpart. We are two countries pulling in almost exactly opposite directions. Two countries, what's more, that were both respectively sovereign, independent nations for many centuries before coming together in a voluntary union. But that union has now soured. That marriage has failed, and for Scotland, it seems to hold nothing but pain. I could talk about Brexit and the disaster that it's bringing down on so many of our Scottish businesses. I could talk about the contempt that we see in the debating chamber in Westminster for Scotland, for her politicians and for her people. I could talk about the corruption, for that's what it is, and the chaos that the Tories have brought to their handling of the pandemic. But I'd much rather talk about the future that awaits us out of the Union and as one of the 190-odd normal independent countries around the world. That's a future that I believe could be proud and brilliant, a future with a focus on well-being and kindness, on tolerance and on inclusion, a future also about prosperity and international standing. Because independence is an opportunity to dream big, and no one ever got anything by dreaming small. So next week, if you haven't yet voted, please, whatever you think about independence, whatever you think about the parties and what they stand for, at the very least, ensure that your vote says, yes, I believe Scotland should have that fundamental democratic right to choose its own future. Don't be tempted to game the system. It doesn't work, and there's far too much at stake. And remember that a government with an absolute majority is the one that sends the loudest and strongest message to Westminster and the world beyond. Think of your children, think of your grandchildren. And for me, that means voting either SNP 1 and 2 or, as a matter of conscience, SNP 1 and Green 2. I'll see you the other side.